I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime Magazine. I'm here today with David Jemet, CEO at CISO Global, a publicly traded cybersecurity company listed with the ticker symbol CISO on NASDAQ. To learn more about our sponsor, CISO Global, visit cisoglobal.com. David, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, David, we're here to talk about CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers. But let's start with CISO Global. It's a fantastic name. I love it. You're rebranding from Cerberus Sentinel. Your company helps CISOs. Couldn't have a better name. Tell us a little bit about that.
I appreciate that. Well, initially when we started, I couldn't say CISO Global because we were very small. And this company was to go out and bring my friends together with the different aspects of cyber. So from compliance, gap analysis, pen testing, incident response. And now that we're a global presence and have offices around the world, we could change it to CISO Global. So I've had the name for 3 years, but we were waiting for the right time to actually change over.
I don't think a lot of companies recognize how important that is from a branding standpoint. It's memorable. It's easy to say. You've got the domain name, cisoglobal.com. So I think it signals great things to come for the company.
Thank you. I surely hope so.
So let's jump in. Let's talk about CISOs. You know, back in the early 90s, when I was in the industry, I actually started out, not to date myself, in the early 80s. There was no CISO. There was no such thing. We didn't even have the word cybersecurity, as you're well aware. The first CISO was appointed in 1994. That was at Citicorp after they were hacked. Russian cyber criminals were behind that. The position has certainly evolved quite a bit. It took a while for us to reach a point where, you know, every Fortune 500 company now has a CISO. Still, unfortunately, many mid-market companies don't, but I think we're going to see more and more of that. What have you observed? How important do you think that position is to the companies and to our community?
Quite frankly, it's very, very important. I mean, IT builds systems and, cybersecurity experts, whether it's compliance or, incident response, we're there to help companies protect themselves, which really creates shareholder value or value in the company because you're protecting, as you're well aware and have published many numbers about incidents that take place every second. A lot of people, it was a dark box before the pandemic. I think it's become more and more relevant to the point where the news is picking it up. And because of your publication, people are starting to see the actual drastic things that are taking place. And essentially, all of us, including my frenemies, need to work together to protect not only companies, but individuals.
And what about the companies who don't have CISOs? And again, we hope to see more of them. You know, we're going to talk today about Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies who you help, you serve CISOs. But as you start to move downstream, you have companies, and of course, when you get even into some of the smaller businesses, there's no CISO. Sometimes there's not even a cybersecurity person working for these companies.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that people don't recognize. A lot of mid-market companies, even manufacturers, have had people say, why do I need cybersecurity? I'm just a bottle manufacturer. Well, because you have money and you're a target. Everyone's a target. It's important because maybe you missed something or you grew up in the industry, grew up within the company and you just want to check to see what you're doing. The mid-markets to smaller organizations really need it because, as you know, most of the bots are out there just looking for openings into organizations, whether to exploit them or ransomware. And so it's really important to take a look at the infrastructure from an outside perspective, but really we like working with folks internally to help them remediate issues because there's never a time we've gone in when they don't have cyber and understand it. Number one, the training to help the executives understand how important it is. But more importantly is to help them have a better cyber posture. I always joke around, how do you outrun a bear? Well, the same in cyber, you have to be more secure than the other companies are. And that's a terrible thing to say, but let them be the target and look to yourself to protect not only your reputation, but more importantly, your assets.
So, David, we did research 2 years ago on CISOs, and I have to say, there's not a lot of research we conduct where, I'm surprised. We usually go into it having a fairly, strong handle on what we're researching, and we've seen other reports. We've vetted a lot of information, but the report we did 2 years ago on CISOs analyzed Fortune 500 companies. So, you're talking about America's largest corporations. And we went through every single company. Statistically, we found the turnover rate was way above and beyond what we had expected. The average tenure for a Fortune 500 CISO, and this was the same when we conducted similar research last year, was a year, 1 year. So, you're talking about musical chairs. Now, to be fair, there certainly are some longer tenured CISOs and there were some retirements, but still, that number is very, very high. What's your observation? Do you see that type of turnover in the industry?
I do. That's one of the reasons we're public is to keep our assets, which are our people, and have them stay with us long term. The problem is, and I've read quite a few of your reports, the problem is they become a victim, but they're also the bad guy. So if something takes place, the first person they blame is the CISO. But what we find when we go in, whether they've been terminated or questioned by the executives need to be trained what a CISO does, because CISOs really need to have a place at the C level. It's really important because they either report to an in-house counsel, the CTO or CIO. Well, what does the CIO and CFO do, or CTO? They have their jobs, and you're telling the CISO who goes across compliance, offboarding, onboarding to making it secure. The CTO is going to say, don't tell me what's wrong or you're not going to get a raise. And the CIO says the same thing if they report to them. And so they get frustrated. In fact, there are many CISOs who've changed jobs who I'm friends with who just said I could not get the support I needed to strengthen our cyber posture, or they wouldn't give me the funds or the resources to fix what the problem was. And so they left, going to another organization that felt it was an important position.
Well, it's an interesting observation you make, David. And I mean, I suppose cybercrime is the only type of crime where there's no sympathy for the victim. They just immediately point their fingers, and some things, never change, or maybe never say never, but it takes a long time. Going back to that first CISO, that was Steve Katz, 1994. And we interviewed Steve, filmed with him, and, got to know him. And he told us the backstory. And one of the conditions of his employment at that time was that he not disclose the hack publicly, and Citicorp wasn't going to announce it until after he came on board, and he was there for 30 days. Why? So that they could have a CISO to point to. And, it's an unbelievable story. And, he couldn't believe the backlash, had no idea what that was going to look like. And, to this day, we still see a lot of that, unfortunately.
That interview was excellent. And it is pointed on why things are going wrong and who's going to point the finger. Well, how can a CISO, when a CEO or COO comes out with a publication or an answer to why they got breached, they're pointing to somebody, but how can the CISO come back and go, well, I didn't have the support, I didn't have the resources, and you didn't give me the people to help remediate. So I loved how it evolved in this story.
So March 2023 is International Women's Month, and actually March 8th, the day we're interviewing you, even though this will air sometime afterwards, is International Women's Day. So I'd like to ask you a question about women in our industry. We have seen progress, maybe not as much as we would like. About a decade ago, women made up around 10% of the people in our industry. Now it's about 25%, and looking ahead, we're seeing those figures steadily climb. We're hoping 30 to 35% over the next 4 or 5 years. Yet with CISOs, we're not seeing much of a change. When we did that study last year and the year before, the number was steady. 17% of women hold Fortune 500 CISO positions. Do you think there's room for improvement there? Or, I should say, are you optimistic we can, move the needle and bring more women into the fold?
Well, I always say it's not the gender. It's the person who's right for the job. I just happen to be very fortunate to have amazing women in cybersecurity. I mean, Ashley Devoto was Booz Allen's CISO, and now she's our CISO. She was right for the job, fantastic, bright. Our CFO comes from the industry, has a background with Beyond Trust. We have three incident response women who are just as good as our folks that are male. So I believe it's almost like broadband. In the beginning, it was male dominated when the internet first came out. Now I'm dating myself. And the last IETF meeting for engineering task force, it was probably close to 25-30% were women. So I think there's going to be improvement. I believe cybersecurity is still in its infancy. It's almost like the internet in 93, 94. People said, what is it? By 98, we didn't get enough. There's still innovation that's going to happen in cyber. I mean, you published a number for last year losses, and with 4 million job openings, I would encourage people to take that course because it's not going away, and we need all the help we can get. So I think ambassadors like Ashley Devoto is going to be good for us to go out to some of the colleges she's going to and talking about cyber and how important it is to get in it and how a great job opportunity is for growth.
So you touched on some of your people, David. I'm familiar with the company and some other people. You have a fantastic team. Talk to us about what CISO Global does. Exactly what is it that you do for CISOs and companies globally?
Well, I appreciate you asking. It's a little different. A lot of people don't understand what we did. It came from, you're aware of it, my background this is my seventh organization. And when I retired, I had Fortune 500 companies calling me, their CTOs or CEOs, asking what this budget line was. So I was very lucky to go out with some of my previous coworkers, the people I'd worked with. So we did cybersecurity as a culture, not a product. A lot of people, product wise, put their product in, but you need to make it work congruously, right? You need it to work together. We're the folks that will analyze your company on a holistic basis and then come up with a remediation plan on how to fix those issues. But a lot of large organizations or mid-sized companies have firewalls. Some have SIEM, some have XDR. And so do they work together? And we find typically they aren't working together. And so we have the experts to go in and help put those things together so it will give you the right reporting and also be more of a protective state. So think of us as IT build systems. We manage the systems from a security aspect instead of just looking to make sure they're working properly.
We have a lot of CISOs tuned into us, David, and you're singing their song, and we need to hear more of that. We interviewed the CISO at Northwell Health the other day. So that's the largest private employer in New York State, largest healthcare system in New York. They have 83,000 employees across, I think, about 200 locations. And we asked their CISO, what is the most important thing to you? And that's a tough question, but she didn't hesitate and said culture. So definitely aligned with your message. Great to have you on with us, David. Before you go, just a last question. You talk to a lot of CISOs, obviously, and with that name, I know you're going to be talking to a lot more of them. In your opinion, what keeps them up at night? What's the single biggest, or maybe a couple of their biggest concerns that you're hearing?
Two or three things come to mind. Number one is my executive level or board doesn't understand cyber. And so I'm not getting the funding. And so IT is in healthcare, 6 to 8%. Where am I getting my 1% or 2%? IT can't be IT anymore. They need to learn more security. And I think the CISOs are concerned they're not actually being supported by their board level. And they want help. And that's why they bring folks like us into, because it's just not an engineering, it's compliance that sets the tone. Are you in compliance? If you have PCI DSS3, HIPAA, SOC 2, are you in compliance, number one? And number two, how do I get the systems in place to support that? And I talk to a lot of CISOs and C-levels. My job as a CEO is to help educate. And hand in hand, I go in with the CISO to talk to the executive level, or our folks do, to explain how serious it is. Because I don't think they really understand, even with your reporting, the serious nature of what could take place. And it seems to resonate with the C-levels, the reputation. But if your systems are critical and you're down for 2 weeks, how much is it going to cost you? Not just reputation. So the CISOs are concerned. You know as well as I do, being in this industry, if you want to get hacked, they will hack you. What does DOD, CIA, FBI, Walmart, Walgreens, Marriott, Target all have in common? They've all been hacked. And so you just need to keep continuing. Cybersecurity is just not buying a product. It is continuing your process through compliance and making that journey. And it will continue to be a journey because the cyber experts out there on the wrong side are working 24/7. I believe your number was 6 trillion last year. That's a GDP of a country. I don't know how many CISOs are making $1 billion. So we have a long ways to go, and the only way we can do it is working together.
Well, David, we appreciate you joining us today. For the CISOs who are following us, you can go out to our website, cybersecurityventures.com. You can go to CISOglobal.com for the CISO Global website, and both of us have a report for you to read through, and we'll tell you just how many CISOs are in the world. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime Magazine. Joining us today was David Gemmett, CEO at CISO Global, a publicly traded cybersecurity company listed with the ticker symbol CISO on NASDAQ. To learn more about our sponsor, CISO Global, visit CISOglobal.com. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.